This is the Spotlight on Media to Africa, and welcome to today's program to all our viewers across the globe. We have a very beautiful panel of seasoned professionals. In me today in the studio, we have a veteran journalist, Eric Chingi, and the permanent consultant to the Spotlight program, Mr. Kenneth Nde. Today we're going to focus on the current socio-political situation in Cameroon. The year 2025 is really going to turn out as a very critical year in the Republic of Cameroon. Cameroon is basically at the crossroad. We are at an inflection point that needs the collective input of both of the sons and daughters of Cameroon, both in the continent and here in the diaspora. So this conversation today is not only going to look at the challenges, or either criticize what has been done so far in the country, but would also attempt at solutions and the contributions that the people here in the diaspora are going to contribute. So I am going to have the panelists introduce themselves. I would start on my right, veteran journalist Eric Chingi.
Thank you, Shutang, and greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Chingi. As you can see, I'm here with my two younger brothers, one actually my son even. My name is Eric Chingi. I currently live in the Washington area, in Alexandria, actually, and I'm retired from the World Bank, and I used to be on CRTV in Cameroon Television, editor-in-chief, and have also been the director of communications at the African Development Bank for a few years, and right now I'm back here trying to be helpful to Cameroon as best I can.
Thank you, Mr. Richingi. And on the extreme end, we have Mr. Kenneth Nde.
Thank you. My name is Kenneth Nde. Professionally, I'm a computer scientist, but I think I see myself more as a political activist, at least from the Cameroon angle. I used to be president of the Cameroon Students Association in the 90s here in the Washington, D.C. area. Also, basically, I've been in the IT field for a little over 30 years now. And I think I would say I am interested in the political future of Cameroon come 2025 and beyond.
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you, Eric. I am going to really plunge directly by my opening question. This is going to be conversational. We attempt to look at possible scenarios on what is going to happen in Cameroon in this year and in the future. So why are we here? How did we get to this present situation in Cameroon where you have an outburst of calls for the president of Cameroon not to run again? I am looking at, is it a problem of a system or a situation where we have state capture by certain individuals? What is prompting the particular call? What is different this time around? Because it seems to me that during election periods, these same cries of economic hardship, the suffering of the masses, the disregard of basic human rights and justice for the people of Cameroon is always the norm. What is really different this time, and why is it that there is a need and a call that Biya should not run for re-election?
You know, for me, I take a very simple approach, or maybe simplistic even approach to this. First of all, I think the president, Mr. Biya, whom I happen to have known, is honestly too old to run a country as complex as Cameroon. And this is nothing about against age, but at 92 and beyond, I do not see Mr. Biya or any human being on the planet capable of determining the future of a country which is caught up in the fast currents of a changing globe. Technology changes, changes on the financial markets, changes in how we put together development programs. Mr. Biya, in all honesty, anybody who loves that country, all the ministers, many of whom are friends of mine, all the heads of companies and so on in Cameroon, who today want to stand up and speak about this, about another mandate for this president, they know. They cannot look us in the eyes and say, I'm saying this because Mr. Biya should be, deserves to be president again. The reason they're doing it is, to come back to a term you used, Tamenyang, very appropriate. It's all because of the state capture. They own the treasury, they own the wealth of the land, and they want to keep it that way. They want to keep the status quo. So we're talking about a bunch of, I'll use the right term, thieves, a bunch of thugs, and we should say it as it is. And in all honesty, and again, as I say, I happen to know a lot of these fellows, many are friends of mine. I don't think they want to even belong there. I don't think, they're good people in government who will be required to help us, navigate the very troubling waters on which the ship of state is currently caught up in. They're good people. And we can name quite a few of them in government. So we're not really against everyone. The fact is, they need leadership, and that leadership is not there, which Mr. Biya could provide. So please, let us not even, look, I hope we don't even go there. Mr. Biya should not be a president after 2025 in Cameroon.
Thank you. But surrogates of Mr. Biya quickly points to the double standard and hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, that the Pope is also very old and partially incapacitated. What is really the difference? That is the question.
If that question is to me, I mean, I gladly answer. Look, I was reading a piece by Archbishop Nkea last night, in which he was very clear. The church is very structured. And even when the Pope said, let's bless LGBT couples and LGBTQ people, they stood up and said no. So we have a system where there is a genuine decentralization of power. And that's what we're talking about. If we could have that in Cameroon, maybe the president will not be as relevant as he is. Unfortunately, in Cameroon, the president is still is the central figure. The presidency today is where all the powers of state reside. And that's what we're talking about.
Thank you. I think I want to welcome Comrade Hubert Kamwa. But before I get to him, Kenneth, can you give us a historical perspective of how Biya ascended the throne? And is there a difference between what we see now with what we had during Ayijo? Because from my analysis and really reading through the materials, it is quite obvious that both regimes rely on patronage and a system of clientelism. And the divide and rule tactics that they have pitted Cameroonians against each other. Can you give our viewers a historical perspective of how we got to this situation?
Sure, I can. Okay, thank you, Brado. In the case of Mr. Amadou Ahidjo, before he came to power, he was actually a translator for Aruna Njoya, slightly before independence. And when France was getting ready to get rid of André-Marie Mbida in East Cameroon, the Lamido of Ray Buba, he was asked who he thought could replace André-Marie Mbida, and they found a good replacement somehow in Amadou Ahidjo. And that's how Amadou Ahidjo came to power. Prior to that, Amadou Ahidjo had actually run for electoral politics. And he won. He was an MP from his northern constituency around the Garoua area in the assembly in East Cameroon. Amadou Ahidjo was president and ruled from 1960, and I'm abbreviating things quite a little bit here, let's just say until 1982, when he passed on power to the incumbent president, Paul Biya. Now, the question is, and if you don't mind, I can, especially for the benefit, I would say, of most Cameroonians who form I would say more than 70% of the Cameroonian population, they are 45 years and below, because President Biya has been in power for 42 years. The people who are 45 years old today know no other president other than President Paul Biya. And I think I would want to take a little bit of a psychological profile into the person we're dealing with. President Biya was born to Mr. Mvondo, a catechist, and Mrs. Anastasie Brenda. His official date of birth is 1933. If we look carefully at his family history, you would agree with me that his father was a catechist who came from, let's just say, the Abongbang area and settled in Mvomeka. His father descended from the Yezum clan. So strictly speaking, President Biya is Lembe Yezum and not necessarily Bulu, as is professed out there. He went to primary school, I think, in his area of birth, and then later, I believe, in the Leclerc, where he has had many classmates who have been ministers of government. In fact, in 1959, the Prime Minister of the Southern Cameroons, Mr. John Foncha, met Paul Biya in France as a student, and encouraged him to come back home. Back then, when he was a student, he was a member of UNEC. UNEC stands for the Union Nationale des Étudiants Camerounais. Camerounais avec K. Most UNEC members who were students at the time, they later became members of UPC. And quite frankly, with Paul Biya having a lot of friends who were UPC, I believe he was a UPCist as a student. But I mean, I cannot prove that. When he came to Cameroon,
in essence, not to really cut you short, you are saying Biya has been in the corridors of power from the 60s up to the present moment, and the system can no longer continue with its continuously being at the helm of the country. Is that what you're trying to tell the audience?
Yes, that is essentially what I'm saying. Paul Biya comes from a generation of, let's just say, the colonial generation. And if you look at what happened to a lot of French colonies around those 60s, from Ivory Coast, Guinea, Chad, Central African Republic, and so on, the true independent, people who were engaged in the true independent movement, Olympio of Togo, all these guys, France actually, let's just say, took them out of power and replaced all of these guys with people who were much more malleable to their neo-colonial empire. And Paul Biya is just a continuation of the Amadou Ahidjo regime.
Meaning essentially there has not been any visible differences between the Ahidjo regime and the Biya regime. Is that what you're telling the audience? Not
at all. As a matter of fact, in the very peculiar case of Cameroon, when Southern Cameroon joined with East Cameroon, the 1961 constitution stipulated that it's going to be a federal country. So you had the president from East Cameroon and the vice president, in this case Foncha, from West Cameroon, and the constitution was that way. It's later on in 1972 where they tampered with the constitution with the form of the state. I think it was Article 48, whereby they now made a united republic. But still, even at that, when something happened to the president, then it had to be the president of the National Assembly who would take over. I don't know if I should say unfortunately or fortunately, in 1979, the constitution was changed from having the president of the National Assembly take over the presidency to the prime minister. That is how President Biya was appointed prime minister in 1975, now became president a few years later in 1982. In fact, the president of the National Assembly, Mr. Solomon Tandeng Muna, was whisked off, if I can put it that way. He was tricked and went to England. But he got wind of the fact that there was going to be something to Cameroon, and he had to book a flight and hurry back into Cameroon. Amadou Ahidjo was surprised to know that he had come back into the country, and that is how he was now able to administer the oath in 1982 at the National Assembly in Guayaquil.
Thank you. Let me come back to Eric. Some people argue that there is the narrative that Biya is thinking he's young because his entire regime is made of old people. So within that generation, within his contemporaries, they can consider themselves as still young. But the country has changed. I think close to about 60-70% of the country is below 50 years old. So do you really see into this argument that they keep on saying that Biya is still young and capable, and if he is willing to continuously dispose of the responsibilities that the people have bestowed on him, he should continue?
You know, I think the tragedy of the country now is we're talking, we're not talking about the future, and we're not talking about programs for the future. We're not talking about how we get the country out of the hole in which it finds itself today, essentially a hole dug by the regime in place. And instead of talking about real issues, we're talking about Mr. Biya. We're talking about old men who should have long been on retirement. That's what we're concerned about. I think we should go beyond this, and I'm really hoping that every single Cameroonian who's of voting age will not only register to vote and make sure their votes count. That every single Cameroonian should question anybody who wants to come to power, should question the ideas they have, the program they have, the political agenda they have to transform Cameroon. That should be our concern. And I think we should, we have to just hope, sorry about that, we have to hope that God would help us, and we help ourselves, put the Biya agenda aside, clear the political space, and allow people to argue around ideas. Because unfortunately, as long as it's a personality-driven debate, the CPDM will find a reason to tell us why a man of 92, who cannot even hold a meeting of his ministers, who does not even recognize many of his ministers, who has no idea if roads are being built, hospitals are being built, for which we've taken loans from abroad, for which debt has been incurred. This guy, President Biya, is totally incapable. And if there's one person in Cameroon who thinks this is not true, they should call me and let me know. And I'm willing to have a debate about that. Totally incapable of determining or charting a course for the country. And that's what we should be talking about. Let's stop talking about Mr. Biya. I want to think his time is over. He deserves to go on retirement. Let's do everything to reassure him about the peace of his last years on earth. But please, if you love the country, talk about an agenda for rebuilding Cameroon.
To piggyback to that particular concern, most of the Cameroonian voters, I may say, have been discouraged. It is as if they are left to their own devices, that there is no way you're going to win an entrenched system like that through the ballot box. How do you assure them that this time is going to be different?
Yeah, it's a legitimate question, and I think we're all concerned about that. We know what tactics the ruling party, the CPDM, engages in. But we're now talking. We should look. Our focus should be on a couple of things. One, love of country. If people love the country and want to see it prosper, and this is a country that's capable of taking care of all of its children. But right now, what do we have? We have a nation where unemployment has, gone beyond the roof. We have a situation where Cameroonians go to bed hungry because they don't have food to eat. We have a situation where there's not a single good tarred road in the country of any significant distance. We have a situation where there's no good hospital. We have a situation where our educational system is on a clear decline, visible to all. How can any right-thinking Cameroonian accept that? That's why I say, let us open the playing field. Let us insist on development, on what people are offering in terms of a program and a political agenda. Let us insist on that, and let us vote them in because we think they have the answers to the problems we have in the country today. We can't keep going as if Cameroon is in a happy state, and it takes anybody or an absent president to move it to the next level. It's not just going to happen. Look at our justice system, completely destroyed. So.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to bring Hubert Kanwa of the CPDM. Mr. Kanwa, can you hear me, please? Yes. Dr. Chris Fomunyo of the National Democratic Institute, speaking on Dash TV on the flurry of calls that have been ongoing for the president to not seek re-election at a time when the country faces major challenges, had this to say. We all know that with the challenges that Cameroon faces today, the country needs a leader who would be awake and hardworking on a 24-hour, 7 days a week basis. But if the CPDM party makes President Biya their choice, that will be their choice, and I think they will be prepared to live with the consequences. MRC President Maurice Kamto also, in one of his public statements, warned of serious consequences. What does this really mean? Hubert.
Thank you so much. And I want to first of all apologize for my coming in late. I got a whole lot of stuff happening this morning, but I had to make time for this anyway. I also want to thank my big brother and he's a clear patriot of Cameroon, Eric Chinje. I think his heart is in a good place, and it's always good to have him on these kinds of panels to share his passion for the development and prosperity of Cameroon, our native land. And of course, I also want to send my greetings to Nde Kenneth, who is also, I'm always amazed at his, the historicity of our dear nation and the historical context that he seems to master so well. That being said, I really want to make sure that, just to kind of, Mr. Chinje, and Eric, if I may just call him through his first name, I remember when I was a young student in Guayaquil University, and I remember vividly the interview that he had with the president, and it was such a landmark moment for all of us, because he was actually one of the first journalists, English journalists for that matter, English-speaking journalists for that matter, that I had a one-on-one direct interview with um, Mr. Biya. And I think over the years, his ideas have changed. And I think his ideas have also evolved based on his observations in the international scene and based on his experiences as a seasoned international um, civil servant, for lack of a better word. But to call on Mr. Beer to step down just because of his age or because of the fact that his administrative system is seemingly oligarchic is to undermine the rule of law, which is the cornerstone of a democracy, a young democracy such as ours. You see, it's very easy to say these things, but when you look at the constitutionality of our republic, and you look at what we say in French sometimes, l'intérêt supérieur de l'État. You know, statehood is not something that is created by the whims of man. It is a systemic response to the survival instinct of humanity in a given geography. In other words, all of us, as they say, are passing, but the state will remain. So the primary mandate that we as a party, and of course our chairman, as the leader of our party, his primary mandate was to consolidate and is to consolidate the democratic institutions of our nation, to gently but surely plant these institutions, which are the governing instruments of the people, and in our case, a very diverse people. It's very easy to say, he's been there for 50 years, for 60 years, who knows? Of course, it is the manifest will of the people. It is easy to say the CPDM are a corrupt outfit and we do all these things. These charges are okay in a political arena. But the manifest will of the people, not what the Bamili case want, not what the Northerners want, not what the Betty wants, not what the Littoral folks want. At the end of the day, the government is the representation of the manifest will of the people. I want you to pay attention to this word because we have seen every other place in this world where when the people do not want a leader, whether he's 20 or 70 or 80 or 90, when the people do not want these leaders, they quit the scene. It is not by magic. It is not by any hand of witchcraft or whatever that Mr. Biya, that he represents the manifest will of the people. Having said that,
Yes,
I do
Hubert,
agree
thank
again.
you. Thank you. I think I would let Eric address the issue about the ageism. I think before you join us, he had clearly stated that it's not about his age, about his physical capabilities to dispose of that responsibility if at all he runs and win for another term of office. So I want you to look at his incapacitation physically. Does he has that strength to go for another 7 years mandate? So we are looking at 99 years in office. Or is it just the CPDM telling us that trust us? We have somebody that has this messianic strength, knowledge, and the physical strength needed to really dispose of this his duty at the helm of the country. I will let Eric come in before you can do a follow up. While you do a follow up, I would be following up with Mr. Ediager, Pastor Ediager, who is from the SDF party, I suppose.
Well, thank you, Tony. I have a lot of respect for my brother Hubert, and I want to make a couple of things clear. One is I don't have anything against the CPDM putting up a candidate. If that party has a good program for the country to resolve the crisis, the evident crisis we're talking about, the crisis in health, in education, in agriculture, in technology, in infrastructure, if they have a response to these issues, please, any day, I'll vote if you put up a good candidate with a good program. So it's not about the CPDM. And I want to ask Hubert again. The president cannot stand up for long. He cannot sit down for long. I'm not inventing this. You know as well as I do. The president cannot address any single issue with consistency because of his state of mind. We're not inventing this. So the president, obviously, you cannot even tell him to go on Google and find answers to some questions he may have, or to use artificial intelligence to do things. And yet, that's the world we live in. Tell me, Hubert, why would you punish an old man? Even at my age, I'm having difficulties with the new technologies. Why would you want not only the old man, but the nation to be subject to this? As I say, I have nothing against Mr. Biya, except to say that he should go home and rest. Let me put one thing on the table. In 1992, a suggestion was made to him, to Mr. Biya, to modify the Constitution and create what would be tantamount to an imperial presidency. A presidency that just oversees the country, and where the issues of state are effectively run by a prime minister who issues from parliament, who comes out of a majority party in parliament. In that case, it would be today, Diangute, could have been somebody else prior to him, Mr. Yang prior to him, Mr. Musonge before that, but it would have been the prime minister. Had Mr. Biya accepted that idea, and he could generally stay there forever if he wanted to. He didn't want that. He wanted to run the country. And I'll ask my brother, Hubert, do you think Mr. Biya is capable of running the country when I think he cannot even handle himself, his own life? Can he run the country?
Let Hubert respond.
I have something on what Hubert said. Hubert talked about the rule of law.
Hubert, let Kenneth come in for a second, and then you come in. Also, Ejacha, I am going to ask you the next question.
Okay, thank you. So with regards to the rule of law, and I'll make this really quick. In 2008, when President Biya was changing the constitution, he had already taken the oath of office, I believe I don't know if it was 2003 or 2004. 2004, where he was doing his last term of office. When the constitution was changed, Yaoundé militarized and so on in 2008 to remove term limits. I'm not a constitutional expert, however, I am not aware that when a constitutional change is made, it is backpedaled. It's retroactive. Honestly, I'm not aware. So, to me, that change of constitution of 2008 was to who comes after. And it did not apply to him. He had taken his last oath of office in 2004. So he was not even eligible to run in 2011. That's the first thing about the rule of law. Second thing on the rule of law, CPDM. I do not know the last time CPDM held an ordinary Congress, let alone an extraordinary Congress. Paul Biya ceased to be chairman of CPDM in 2021. So, legally, following the law, CPDM has no chairman. I think I'll end there for now. We can give him.
Yes, Hubert, can you come in, please?
Thank you so much, sir. So now, just to make sure we understand, I want to make sure I address Eric's first remark about the capacity of Mr. Paul Biya to still lead our country, given his issues regarded to age and ageism, which is we are all mortals and we expect to get there someday. No one is actually, and I don't want to come across as being naive. No one is actually going to say that we don't have any concerns about his health and his capacity to rule. We do. We are humans. We are really humans, and we observe these things, and we know it's very classic. I remember here when our current president of the United States of America, Biden, wanted to run. It took a lot of pressure from his party folks to allow him not to run. And this was an internal party decision that was, of course, in accordance with their policies and procedures. And it's the same thing that should apply to a political outfit in Cameroon, such as the CPDM or any other party for that sake. If they, in the CPDM, through their internal mechanisms, choose to allow a 92-year-old to continue to be the flag bearer of their party, we have to respect that. I think as much as we or some other folks may disagree, it is that to which I refer when I speak of the rule of law. It is very important that these routines, these albeit sometimes imperfect gestures, be respected. It is very important for us to know that as we build our young country, it is not people, it is institutions. And these are the kinds of things that are the foundational principles of building strong institutions. I may be stretching it, but besides that, coming to the state apparatus and coming to the fact that even as much as Cameroon is a presidential republic, you would see in the state apparatus um, a chief of staff at the presidency and an assistant, a direct vice, very functioning. You will also see a secretary general of the presidency and an assistant to that, and then you will see a prime minister. So for the functionality of the system doesn't truly require the energy of just a single person. It is a synopsis, it is a very delicate administrative apparatus that is put in place while governing the country. I'm not, and I've never been a member of government, but I fancy that there is some kind of harmony between these various structures that I've just named that will allow the continuity of state even when our president, for a short time or for a long time, may seem incapacitated. This is a stretch. So to say that because he's 92, to say that he has difficulty in walking does make him not eligible for leadership can be disputed, and be done so very logically. And Cameroonians know that the country runs. It may not be running as efficiently as we would like to, but it runs. The third aspect there is, you see,
Yeah,
again,
that's better.
Cameroon, and I don't want it to go into our
Yes.
geopolitical implications there. It is
Just
very
send the
important
link.
that we
People are
have
asking.
a state that projects
What happened to the link?
stability, that projects continuity, and that projects
You have it.
political maturity, so to speak. Paul Biya, I can tell you for sure that he would love to go and, like he said, back to his village and rest some more if he can. But he too loves Cameroon. He too loves his legacy, and he understands what may ensue if the transition or the democratic process of his last term or his uh, next term is not managed efficiently or correctly. I think we have to just be very clear. If we want a change in the country, go ahead. Do what you can. I have not heard any CPDM partisan or sympathizer say they wouldn't allow any other party or outfit to rule. It's just the nature of the game. We just have these misfortune of having been in power for so long. And because of that, of course, we have so much baggage that we have carried along over the years that makes us easy target for critics and political observers here and beyond. It is not Paul Biya's fault. It is not Cameroon's fault. It is all of us together trying to figure out how to project into the next decade or the next decades in the next years with certainty that the nation survives. There is people who are speaking of implosion. There are people you've just mentioned, Camto and the other young doctor there, and they are, sending out idle threats, and it's a shame. I think elites and leaders of thought leaders such as Eric.
Hubert, I
Can you just
think
let me finish, please? Let me just. I will
Hubert,
just. I
Hubert,
just conclude.
Hubert. I think I don't think that in any way, shape, and form we have indicated that anybody is sending any threats. If they're sending threats, you know very well that the regime in Yaoundé has been sending threats and had even prohibited people from even talking about the health of the head of state. We cannot maintain that double standard if you genuinely believe that what you're saying for the future of Cameroon, people could not express themselves freely, and you frame that as a threat. I don't think that that is something that we would want to encourage. So I'm going to go over to Pastor Ejacha. Before you got here, the question was, how did we get here? Is Cameroon suffering from an entrenched and rotten system of governance, or from the state capture of particular individuals, in this case, President Paul Biya? Because the system doesn't look to be different from what Aijo had in place, where you had state repression. Essentially, my question to you is, if we change President Biya right now and bring in somebody new without actually overhauling the system, would that make any difference?
Good question.
Thank you very much for that question, which it's very an appropriate question if you look into what's happening now in Cameroon. And talking about change, it's not like we've not had change in Cameroon. We have a precedent that was set in 1982. So if change is just all about removing an individual and replacing him with another, we've seen that in Cameroon. So before I delve a little more, I want to give all deference to the panelists, and my huge respect go to someone whom it's difficult for me to call him by his first name or even by his last name, but because I am a crafty, and respect of the elders is sacrosanct. I would respectfully want to say, me, Eric. I mean, it's a pleasure for me to be on this panel with you, and I would also extend my fellowship to my brother Kenneth Day and to my brother Ibe Kamwa as we get into this debate. It's true. I came in the middle of the debate, and I heard how eloquently uh, Kenneth did, did give us a great panoramic view into the history of Cameroon that could help us have an understanding of why we are where we are today. And added to that, we have on this panel an eyewitness, somebody who, through his courage, spoke out when very few could speak out. Considering, I mean, the largesse that he could receive from the government, the potential that I mean, the potential that he had then to ascend the highest levels of power in Cameroon within the regime. Yeah, I'm talking about the Eric. This is somebody who has explained to Cameroonians who Paul Biya is. And if you never knew Paul Biya, but just from listening to me Eric's previous outing, you would know that this man today, we're not talking about his age. We're not talking. The problem about Paul Biya is not 92 years old. Because if we want to make a fixation of Paul Biya's 92 years, it would be as if when this guy was 50 years, he was useful. Or he did things when he was 50 at that young age. No. This guy, I mean, he hasn't been useful to Cameroonians right from inception when it comes to his presidency. So change it's not going to it's not just about an individual, it's about a system. Because Paul Biya, in all fairness, is a continuation of a system that had been put in place. I mean, for simplification, Kennedy took us back to 1960, but you might go back even to 1958 and see the match that was played precisely around February 58 when the French had to replace Andre Marimbida with Aijo. And then you go back and you see the accord that was signed in December of 1959, just a couple of weeks before the so-called independence of the French Cameroon. So now, in all fairness, there is something that happened in the history of Cameroon that we must outline clearly. In the whole history of Africa, Cameroon is one of those countries that kind of, while people were moving towards independence, we moved towards being colonized. Because historically, we were not a colony of France until the United Nations relinquished its supervisory role over Cameroon on the 1st of January. Did Cameroon now actually become a property of France? And since then, we've stayed on as a property of France. And let's fast forward. For once, I can say, and it rarely happens to me, I'm in accordance with someone from the CPDM. In accordance with you, because our debate should not be on whether Paul Biya has to be a candidate or not a candidate. That's the affair of the CPDM. We have to allow the CPDM make that decision on whether Paul Biya should be a candidate or not, or whether Paul Biya is old or Paul Biya is young. You know, I mean, I don't care about that. What should be our focus? And I think we touched a little bit of that is the future. We should be focused on what are we doing, and it's not even about asking Cameroonian to vote or to scrutinize a program that is being presented. Because on paper, I will tell you, for communal liberalism, it was a great project of society. It was kind of like a new deal. But was that ever implemented? In terms of programs, all those political leaders have fabulous programs. But
Pastor,
we have
Pastor,
to go from people expressing their
Pastor Joshua,
concerns. Yes, sir.
I think it is just not practical for us to say that the candidacy of Mr. Biya is inconsequential to the Cameroonian nation. We know, and history has shown, that the candidate of the CPDM has won all the elections. So we cannot now
I was
say
getting
that
to that.
even if they want to select him as their candidate, it's one of the obvious things that we know. I might like to quote Donald Rumsfeld here, that there are no knowns. So these are things that we know are going to happen. Biya has gone in for elections, I think for our lifetime, for those of us who are still younger. And every time we've had these same skills that the Cameroon people are going to come out in their numbers and vote the president out. The church has actually acquiesced to that all the time. So it is hard for us to sit here again in 2025 and believe that if they nominate Biya again for re-election, it's not going to be consequential. That is hard for you to get Cameroonians to believe. that is really insignificant if the CPDM uh, end up nominating him. As a matter of fact, I think the Secretary General already indicated that Biya is going to run for re-election. And with the state machinery, the same system that you pointed a couple of minutes ago, that until we overhaul that system, is going to hard for us to change anything in that country. How do you reconcile those two?
That's where we are. I, my 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 contention is that talking about Bia's candidacy or the eventuality of their candidacy takes away energy from where we should be focusing our attention. Our attention right now should be focused on how we have to ground that country. We have to go from expressing concerns to outlining action points. We know all the concerns. That's why I say I'm no more expressing concern on whether Biya should be candidate or not, because if Biya is candidate in this present dispensation, he is still going to be president. And if anything should even happen in this present dispensation and Biya is taken out, we will still have a continuation of the program of the system. So that's the conundrum that we are dealing with. Biya out does not guarantee to us that the system is out. So now the bigger piece that we should be dealing with is the system. And how do we flush out that system? Is for us to come out. We need a revolution in Cameroon. I'm just being very politically correct to call it a revolution, because in the fierce opposition that the regime is posing to us with regards to changing the system in Cameroon, if they don't accept, we should be even ready to revolt. People need to revolt against what's going on. We need a revolt. It's unacceptable that somebody who has been incapacitated for 42 years, Bia's incapacitation in managing Cameroon is 42 years long. Because let's see, that's somebody who inherited the country in 1982, which was a medium revenue country in full economic expansion. He acknowledged that. Statistics are there from the World Bank, and Every can enlighten us on that, or maybe you enlighten me some other time. But he took a country that was as healthy as a developing country should be. A few years after, we were knocking at the doors of the International Monetary Fund after they had dried all our reserves. And beyond even knocking at the door, we were put on a structural adjustment program that did not even work. And then now we had to go for the PPTE, but that's people, stress, and detail. So when you put all in mind, I don't know any right-sounded person that will want to tell Cameroonians that the best that they could ever have is Mr. Paulia. And if Mr. Paulia is not the best that we could ever have, then why don't we all coalesce behind the idea of flushing him out and seeking to have the best? We need to have an overhaul of the electoral system in that country, because that is what the regime is using. I'm telling you, if we
Pastor,
don't have an electoral
I
system,
think
if we don't have an electoral system,
Pastor,
1 minute, let me drop.
hold
Let
on to
me
that
drop
thought.
2 seconds.
Hold on to that thought. Hold on to that thought. I was
Okay.
going to press on that point that we need a revolution in that country. I don't think you are oblivious to the fact that there's already a revolution in the southern Cameroons, or what they call the English-speaking section of Cameroon. What is it for those of us who are here in the diaspora, as CPDM surrogates will tell you, that you live in this pristine environment, in air-conditioned homes and air-conditioned offices, and then you try to preach to the less unfortunate and less privileged ones in Cameroon to drive them into a revolution or into a public uprising. What are the measures? What is it that the diaspora is doing to prepare this groundwork that that revolution is not going to be the bloodbath on the ground? Because the government the regime is a repressive regime. There is no question about that. That has been established. The torture with complete disregard, it has been established. Those are facts. What is it that the diaspora, for you here in Washington, D.C., every year in Washington, D.C., Kenneth here, and Hubert, who again seems to think that Biya should continue. What is the role of the diaspora? What is being done to use the necessary resources and the various networks here in the diaspora to effect change in that country? You can go ahead, Eric.
Oh, that was for me. Okay. Thank you very much. And I want to thank my younger brother, Reverend Ejacha, whom I'm so happy to see again. I've not seen him in a while. And to reassure Hubert that this discussion is not an anti-CPDM discussion. We're looking at one man who's unable to have his team deliver on the promises made. The Minister of Roads cannot build roads. It took another member of government to criticize him for all of a sudden something to happen. The Minister of Health is a disaster. I don't want to go back to the COVID funds that everybody knows about, but look at the state of our hospitals in spite of what he says. So we are in a country where the leader of the country, however well-meaning he is unable to hold his generals to account. That's what we are talking about. Mr. Biya cannot. Please, Hubert, you and all those who hold your point of view should try to convince us about that Mr. Biya is still capable. I can give you a few examples. We just don't have the time. But I can give you examples of where the president has expressly wanted something. Mr. Yang, Philemon is still around, he was prime minister, when we went to Cameroon with a project called the Mother of Humanity Monument, which would have transformed tourism in Cameroon and would have been maybe the leading African country in terms of tourism today, 10 years ago. The head of the president's cabinet at the time, the late Bellinger, made it clear to us that if he didn't have his share of the resources that were going to be used, this thing will be done over his dead body. I don't spend time talking about, people who are no longer with us, who can't defend themselves, but that is exactly what happened. And as Mr. Yang will, if he hears this, or if anybody hears this could ask him, he told us that the President Biya thought this Mother of Humanity monument would be his legacy. So the president wanted it. And to impress the point, the president asked my friend Aveline Ava and myself to come to the presidency to be told again that this project has to happen because it's the president's legacy. And his people didn't want it until they had their share. And they never got the share because there was no money. We're going to raise the money later on when the project will be accepted. It's to the point I'm making this point, and I have other meaningful examples. The point I'm making here is, if back then, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, Mr. Biya could not hold his generals to account, it is not today. Please don't tell me. I love Cameroon, and you do too, and I think Mr. Biya does. But he cannot run it. He cannot. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yes, please. Well, part of that is because I think he's in very ill health. He's not held any cabinet meetings in a very long time. But permit me to go, please, a little bit back to the point where Pastor Kennedy Ejacha was talking about an insurrection or a revolution. And this is where, unfortunately, things have turned out to be in the case of Cameroon. It is my hope that Cameroon shall evade a full-blown civil war. Honestly, it is my hope. However, unfortunately, the recipe throughout the national territory for a civil war are very ripe. In April last year of 2024, there was a problem in Yaoundé on the road that leads to the presidency, to the what have you, of Ben Skinners. I think one of them, or two of them, actually died. They were pushed by a gendarme or something to that nature. The Ben Skinners blocked the road to the presidency for 4 to 5 hours. They all came out in Yaoundé, Carrefour Lonkak, on that road. They blocked the road to the presidency for about 5 hours. Okay. What do we have here? All the Republican or state institutions, whether it is the Interior Ministry of, you call it the Territorial Administration, that, and then the ONEL, or the Elections Observatory, it's an observatory, you know. ONEL was foreclosed from declaring elections after what happened in Ivory Coast. They changed the law. And ONEL's, it's just an observatory. It's only the ministry. It went back to the ministry. It's only the ministry that can declare elections. President Biya had shown us signs ever since, I remember this in 2000 something, whereby he had not attended any real international event in more than a year. But when Omar Bongo of Gabon, next door, was celebrating, I don't know, 40-something years in power, Paul Biya went there. He had not been to any real international engagement, but he went over next door to see Omar Bongo celebrate his this thing. If I may appeal to, if he is listening, appeal to Paul Biya's conscience. Please, please, delete, I mean, if Cameroon is your only begotten child, okay, and Jesus was God's begotten son, let Cameroon be delivered from you. Leave, please, step down, step aside, and that would be his legacy. Else, there will be an insurrection. And when the youth, there's more than 70% of those youth, when those youths come out in here, even the gendarme, even the army will join those youths. It will happen. The B and all those guys, they cannot stop. They cannot stop anything.
To press you on that point, I think, what are the recipes? Do we have all the ingredients that are pointing towards the implosion of Cameroon?
Absolutely.
Look at the title of our conversation this evening. If Biya runs again, what is happening in the northern provinces? What is happening in the northwest and southwest? What is going to happen in the west, and what is happening in littoral, center, and the south? What are the conditions that are pointing that there is an impending danger or a cloud that is hovering over Cameroon?
Okay. There are several in place. About roughly 20 years ago, there was a university I think in Eastern Europe that modeled exactly what you're asking. And they came out with the models that they had in place. They came out, the university came out with the fact that the ingredients were already ripe in the case of Cameroon for there to be a strife. And in that university, many people had never heard of Cameroon. Right now, where we are, it's even worse. I give you several examples. Okay. Brado, politics, everywhere you go, politics has roughly a 30-year cycle. We moved from 1960 to 1990, or the early 60s, if I can say, independence movement, to the 90, the multi-party period. Where we are today, you go from 92, 93, what have you, you add 30 years, we are in 2025. And it is an election year. In 2008, where there were, in fact, Polycarp Abba, as Minister of Finance, had sent a secret letter to the presidency that life was becoming very, very expensive in Cameroon and wanted them to reduce certain prices. They refused to. We saw what happened in 2008 in Douala. Life right now is very, very expensive in Cameroon. Ni Eric has just mentioned the unemployment rate in Cameroon is staggering. It is off the roof. There is no chart that can even accept any of those statistics. I worked at the Census Bureau here for 6 years. We take statistics. I mean, the statistics in Cameroon at every, whether it's the mileage of roads that have been built, youth employment, what is happening in the English-speaking side of the country. I mean, you name it. I mean, I don't even know how Cameroon, that ship is steering in whatever direction it's going.
Thank you. Hubert, back to you. I think to go back to what Kenneth has just said, the Catholic Church gave an aseptic indictment of the regime with corruption, unemployment, the deplorable nature of the citizens in Cameroon, and these are facts. Do you really think that the conditions are there for a change to happen not only within the country as a whole, but within the CPDM party to get a different candidate? To be fair to you, is Biya the problem or the system is the problem? Hubert, are you with us? Okay. I think we lost Hubert. Pastor Jaja, can you comment on that?
Yes. Well, it comes back again to that starting point where the question is it Biya who is the problem, or is it the system? You mentioned something about the clergy, the Catholic priest that came out with some strong worded statements. But now, and I'm sorry to say this, but I'm a non-conformist, and not by pleasure. I, I don't want to confront myself with those who think that something miraculous is happening right now because the Catholic priest said something. No, they've always done this. It's good to tell the people that this is not the deal breaker because this we've seen before. We can think about Monsignor Blocko and the church back in his days. We can go back to Christian Cardinal Toomey and his days. We can go to all the different declarations. We can even go to the active participation of the Catholic Church in giving a platform for the Anglophones to meet in Mount Mary in Biya, the All Anglophone Conference. I think that was in '93, and the second one. So the church has always done its part. Now, where is the deal breaker? And I'm going to touch back on something very important that my brother Kenneth brought up. 2008. 2008 should serve as as a point for reflection to those who are at the position of leadership in the opposition. And it also gives us a possibility to understand the mindset of Cameroonians. Because in 2008, the Cameroonian population took its responsibility, went out on the street, spewed out the regime, did what every conscientious people can do. But why did the movement of 2008 fail? It failed because of the lack of leadership. It failed because there was no one who could take that energy that the people released and stir it towards the rightful direction. And by that, the regime came from behind and took an upper hand. What happened in 2008 is one of the greatest things that has ever happened in terms of the people standing to take their responsibility. Now, when we sit and we ask ourselves, if 2008 should repeat itself now, what are the guarantees that we would have someone with that legitimacy and credibility? Because credibility is very essential. Without without legitimacy and credibility to tell the people, yes, we are right to rise up for our right. We are right now to see that the prices of, I mean, that inflation is unattainable in this nation. So we're gonna hold on until we get what we want. I don't see that. And that's
I
what we
think,
should focus on.
Pastor,
Yes.
hold on to those two thoughts. The role of the church, particularly the Catholic Church, and the role of the opposition. We're going to get there, but I think we
Okay.
got back. Hubert, did you get my question to you?
No, please. Yeah, I got the part of it. So if you can go ahead and say it again, please.
Oh, no, I think I was pointing to the academic indictment of the regime by the Catholic Church. Corruption at all-time high, unemployment at all-time high, the economic challenges in the country are an all-time high. Cameroon is one of the poorest countries on earth. We are a highly indebted country. If you look at even in the Central African sub-region, Cameroon, as far as energy is concerned, we have this episodic electricity supply. Even though we are number four with hydro potential in the entire continent, that we could even have the possibility to supply electricity to neighboring countries. So the facts are there, and we are pointing to the idea that do we have a recipe for an implosion of that country in 2025 should the president decide to run again? And I indicated that to be fair to you, is it the president or the system? Because there are a lot of people who present this whole narrative that his closest collaborators do not tell him what is happening in the country. But he is the leader of the gang. He's been there for 43 years. Even if you go back to when he was the director of cabinet at the presidency, meaning that he understands the system in and out. He is the number one person who is supposed to understand the pain and suffering of the Cameroonian people. We cannot continue to try to dismiss that and push it to his collaborators. What is it your take on that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I'm glad that you mentioned this because this is what our elder brother Eric NJ has been alluding to. And the idea is to definitely, if you speak with such certainty about the facts, please, it's always good to quote the source and make sure that what you're stating meets the test of truth. The point is the global context of the world in the past 5 years, or maybe, yeah, so after COVID. So in the past 5 years has been one where we've seen these so-called difficulties that you mentioned. Is Cameroon is not just the only country in Central Africa or in Africa for that matter, or in the world that is suffering from these kinds of challenges. And so it's good for us to put that in context. But having said that, it is very clear, and I don't know if you have read these things, our projected growth for 2024, I mean, the growth for 2024 was about 3.5, 3.6%, if I'm not mistaken, and it's projected to grow even more in 2025. So we are not the poorest country in the world by no stretch of the imagination. We are actually, as a matter of fact, the economic engine of a very important region of Africa, which is the Central African region. And for all I really want to say, and again, I will get back to Eric's allusion to these facts. Yes, there is a lot of room for improvement of the standards of living of our people, given the relative wealth of our nation. That is not something that anyone would dispute. We do agree that there is need for efficiencies because the world has changed. The way the world functions has changed. The world economies and operations have changed. We all know that even in America, there are several sectors that are still struggling to keep up with that. So having said that, the next issue you have to look at is, and it's true, there is always in every nation this polarization of the haves and the have-not. There is always a tense um, um, atmosphere because the have-nots want to have, and the have want to make sure they continue to have. I'm speaking in very broad terms. So if you look at the big picture, our main challenge is how to. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Our main challenge is to find a way to bridge this gap, to build a sustainable middle class. And it has been an enduring challenge for developing nations such as Cameroon, among others, to find a way to build this middle, which is absent in most of our economies. That is the problem, and that is where the solution will be found. I'm not sure Cameroon is an isolated case. Unemployment is high in Rwanda, it's high in Nigeria, it's high in Gabon, it's high in Chad, it's high everywhere you care to look in our sub region and in our continent, as a matter of fact. So to just
But
stigmatize and say, oh, it's not.
Hubert, don't you think it's a little bit disingenuous to say doing the same thing over and over, you're going to get different results? We have a regime that has been in power for 43 years, and if you are still talking about some of these things in this day and age, and if you're trying to rationalize it, and you pointed to the fact that the economy grew by 3% or something like that, but this is not translating to the living condition of the Cameroonian people. And that is why everybody is pointing to the pain and suffering of the people, not only in the urban areas, in the rural areas. The level of poverty is at unprecedented levels. We cannot just uh, brush that away with the simple idea that it is across the globe. What is it that needs to be done? Here in the US, we
Yeah, yeah,
just
sure,
came
yeah,
to
and
an
please
election.
just let.
And in as much as the employment rate here in the Biden administration was very good, the economic indicators were very good, so long as they were not translating to the living conditions of the people, you saw the end results. So if we have a fair and transparent system, if not the cooked up electoral structure in Cameroon, then it is okay for people to say we're going to go for an election and we present these ideas. So I understand that as a party member of the CPDM government, it's your position to defend what the government has done. But let's also face the facts and speak with honesty to the Cameroonian people. Like
Mr.
Eric said,
Moderator, thank you so much.
nobody is
I want
against
you
the
to.
CPDM, but how do we put the concerns of the Cameroonian people up front in these
Thank you.
conversations?
Let me get before you go to another panelist, please, just for a second. So you have to know, and this is again the problem that Eric has put out to us, the panel, making sure that we address how we are going to face these challenges, you see. And again, the idea is, well, Paul Biya cannot do it. I have pointed to the fact that we have to stay with the rule of law and legitimacy and constitutionality and all that stuff. That being said, and again, it's true, I'm not, please don't you ever quote me and say I am just supporting the government. No, I'm being very rational. We all live in a country where we've seen how these things are done. We have a lot of challenges that we are facing in our country, and it's just clear that it has been an enduring task for many, many years. You know, like I said, the interview that probably had with Eric back in the 80s spoke to that in an embryonic form. But what we are trying to do is what is the best way forward? Now, I hear many of my fellow panelists talking about implosion, revolutions, revolt. You know, it's very easy. We heard that stuff in the 2015s and 2016s before we had the mess that we have in the Anglophone English-speaking country provinces. So we don't want to repeat those kinds of things. It's very easy to fan the flame of chaos, but it's very difficult to control it. What we need to do is look at the best way to move forward. And I've explained this just to show you that there are members within the CPDM party, of course, who also think like most of you here. I'm going to be very honest. But the manifest will of the militants of our party and of the Cameroonian society, especially those who are voting, have not been so clear as to allow us to say, okay, CPGM, get out of the way. We want that. We want people to express their point of view. We want people to do what they want to do. And let's be very clear, it is the systemic promotion is a promotion of a system of governance that is enduring, which is what we are trying to protect. We're not protecting anybody. We're not trying to say Mr. Biya should be there because he has to be there. The system, the mechanism has said he wants to be present, and if he has the majority of his folks, then let him be. If he is deemed not capable, even during his term, let the people do what they have to do, but do it in accordance with the governing documents and laws of our country. That is
Yeah,
my major. That is the
thank
only reason.
you. I think I'm going
Yeah.
to leave it there. We could all agree that you are firm with your position that it is a prerogative of the CPDM party to determine who their candidate is. The same with the people who are calling both independent-minded Cameroonians and the opposition party that it's time for Biya to go based on his physical uh, health and the challenges that come with being at the helm of the country. So I'm going to pivot to the opposition. What has been the role of the opposition? How different is the opposition now, different from 2008, 2018, and even the previous election? What is different? What are they actually putting in place? What is the agenda? Because it seems like within the Cameroon political establishment, we wait until the election year before you start hearing a little bit of the chatter within the ecosystem about, oh, there's an election. But elections, like for those of us who are here in the US, elections begin the day when the other president is voted. So that people are in the field, they are mobilizing the grassroots for the next election. What is really, or what has been done by the opposition parties? There is a problem within the Cameroonian opposition that they have never succeeded to put a single presidential candidate to face the incumbent, who happens to be Mr. Biya. What is going to be really different? We should not only look at what the CPDM government is doing. What is that agenda? Eric, I'll go over to you.
Thanks, Tony. The it'll be a tragedy if we are seeking to replace Mr. Biya with another Biya. If we are looking for another Ahijo, another Biya personality, it should not be about persons. I think as we go forward, and I say this to every Cameroonian who can hear this program, as we go forward, it should be about political programs, the manifesto, the agenda. What is it? How do people identify the problems the country currently has? And how do they intend to solve those problems? What solutions do they propose? That's what this should be about. And I hope by taking Mr. Biya out of the picture, it can clear the space. We can have a genuine debate amongst candidates so that we try to find that person that comes with an agenda and a team that can help get the country out of the quagmire it is in right now. This is the point. I listened to all the end of year speeches. I can tell you without any, I was in Cameroon and everybody said, oh, he's come to support his brother Akeremuna. But there's my brother Joshua Osi that I happen to like a lot too. But I've not mentioned them here. I'm talking about Cabral Libby, who had the best end-of-year speech, in my view. Why? Because he identified the problems. I didn't hear him come up with the solutions. That's what we're waiting for. I invite everybody who's interested, go listen to those end-of-year speeches, and you'll see that we have serious problems. We need serious solutions, and as I say, the best of those speeches came from Cabral Libby. The others had good political speeches. But in going forward, we now need solutions. We need, having identified all these issues of corruption and justice and health and so on, let us now ask, and what I liked about Cabral is, he talked about where the money will come from. Because it's not just a matter of saying, oh, we'll rebuild hospitals. But let's see where the resources would come from. We have a very indebted country, and I don't know how Hubert wants to react to this. We have a seriously indebted country, highly indebted, poor country. That's not the country Ahijo left in '82. He left a country that was on the verge of becoming industrialized. And we can name them, we can name companies that existed that should have been, had they continued their progress, would have moved us into industrialization today. They're all out. Camship is out. Cameroon Airlines is out. ONCPB is out. Selucam out. Cameroon Bank out. You can name it. So you can go down the line. No, look, I say this with a heavy heart for someone I like, Mr. Biya, but he has failed. And the CPDM has failed. And it's time to, if the CPDM has a solution, let them propose it. But it's time to move on.
Kenneth?
Yes, please. Thank you. I don't want to lose my train of thought.
Pastor Njacha, could you be on the standby immediately after Kenneth, please?
Okay. Thank you. So, I think President Biya has had one and only one agenda, which is to eternalize himself in power. If you look at history, it is really funny or interesting that he chose to do that, because the only other president in all nations, 180 something at the United Nations, who tried to do that was it's either North Korea or South Korea. I forget which one. And even after his death, he was referred to as the eternal president.
North Korea.
Okay, North Korea, fine. So, Paul Biya, we can refer to him as eternal president, whatever it is that he wants. But anyway, that's his agenda. It is now up to the youth to see to it that that agenda is rendered stultifying. That agenda should never see the light of the day, and it should happen this year. In all fairness, whether it's to Amadu Ahijo and today Paul Biya, these guys inherited in his institutions that, state institutions that were meant rather to, colonial institutions that were meant to repress the indigenous population. And what we've seen throughout time, whether it's from 1990 when multi-party politics were reintroduced, if I can put it that way, is that this new republic that we had to, or the Second Republic of Cameroon, President Biya has gradually put in structures and whitewashed institutions, faire semblant, as they say in French. You create something and take away something. And then in many ways, you thoroughly bastardize those institutions that you've put in place, just so that you continue to be in power. So what do we need to do now? I mean, whoever is president after this needs to rebuild the institutional structures of that country such that it serves the people rather than repress the indigenous people of the country. And then, it is my hope, I mean, I don't know when the next session of parliament sits, but I don't think in Cameroon we have something as a presidential retirement package. Okay, I'm hoping that in the next session of parliament, they pass a law for the presidential retirement package that would entitle the president to his retirement benefits when he goes back to his village. Maybe that can be something that would also encourage him to step aside.
Do you really think that the president is in need of any retirement package after the work that he has accumulated for the past 43 years? Do you really still believe that he is in need of some retirement package? And talking about that retirement package, the villa or mansion in Vomeka is being funded by the state. Once he retired and all of those things associated with it, I am seeing something similar to what is happening to the mansions of people like Bokassa, Mobutu, because the state could not continue to spend in the upkeep of those properties. Bokassa's own residence is completely overgrown. So it goes back to the legacy of Mr. Biya if he's actually thinking about his own contemporaries who came to power almost at the same time. Some have already exited the stage. Nobody even, a lot of people don't even know who Bongo is. Bongo was Gabon impersonation. Eyadema was Togo impersonation. Mobutu, the same. All of these despots in the likes of Biya, the legacy they have left in those countries is not anything that somebody would want to associate with. So, Hubert, is it something that the CPDM is actually looking into, that what exactly is Biya's legacy post his presidency? Will he just disappear, just like the other ones in the sub-region, as history is going to hold him to account for the way he has plundered the resources of that country?
Thank you so much, sir. So listen, and again, I'll go back to Eric has been insisting that we take this conversation away from personalizations into the real substantive issues that we're facing. But we still come back to that. And to be honest with you, and Day Kenneth will tell me that for sure, nobody's going to forget a president who has spent 4 decades in power. You can take that to the bank. It is very difficult to erase the imprint of Mr. Biya in the history of Cameroon. But what I want to say, and again, when Aiju was there, we had a brief experience of his reign. There was also something that we don't speak a lot about, and that was the seeming reign of terror that we actually experienced. That was just a teenager then, but it was a terrible fear that was like a dark cloud over the Republic of Cameroon. I remember when he actually resigned, people were in the streets dancing and they were feasting everywhere because for some it was the advent of freedom. People felt relieved. And that experience is one that cannot be easily taken away from the hearts of those who experienced it. If you speak to Biya today, he will tell you that the development of freedom, free speech, democracy, multi-partism, all of that happened under his reign. He is deemed to be the one who has allowed the multiplicity of news outlets in Cameroon. Um, People can say what they want without fear of being locked up or being pursued or repressed. And it's true.
Hold on to that thought, Hubert. Hold on to that thought. Hold on to that thought. There is no way
Okay.
I am going to let you slide that by. You cannot say people can say whatever they want without fear of being locked up. Lunga's video is too obvious. What happened to Martinez Zogo is obvious. You have people in the southern Cameroons who are sitting in jail. It's obvious, and you can just brush these things away by saying that, okay, when Biya came in, yeah, he came in and promised the New Deal, rigor and moralization, anti-corruption, and all of these things. How do you explain the fact that the Catholic Church is the one inducting that same regime after 43 years, that all of these things that were promised, is we are seeing the opposite? Corruption is at its highest in the country. Amnesty International named Cameroon as one of the most corrupt countries. A few years back, it is in the Biya regime. So even as much as you're going to look at the good things that he did, nobody is going to sit here and say he didn't do certain things. But if you compare the living standards of Cameroonians has not significantly changed. The patronage system of governance, where you have elite barons and the regional way they have done the divide and rule tactic, that was in the Ayijo regime. It is still present in the Biya regime. So in as much as we want to sanitize what he has done, we should also have the honesty to say, hey, there is a need for us to do better. There is room for change. Is it enough? Is it time for him to say, let's give somebody else within the CPDM political machinery to try something new? There is no way you're going to convince almost 30 million Cameroonians that this is the only guy who has the vision and the ability to govern that country for the next 50 years. That is the difficulty that personally I'm trying to reconcile. And it doesn't
Mr.
matter
Moderator,
what
give
people
me
are
one
going to
second.
say, but us as the people who are
Give
from
me
that
give me
country,
1 second,
how do
Mr.
you address these
Moderator.
challenges?
Give me 1 second, Mr. Moderator. I think, at this point, it's seeming that you already have opinions made up about Paul Biya and the CPDM. I think your role should be one of moderating, which is giving each one a fair chance to be heard. You asked me was what would his legacy. I'm telling you, amongst other things that he can claim, one of his greatest achievements is because of the freeing political atmosphere that he ushered in Cameroon. You can take it or leave it. He's got some blemishes for sure, and that is something that we can have a debate at the other time. But the critique of the clergy, again, sometimes it's very easy to think you have the mandate to speak for people when you really don't have it. Cameroon is a secular state. So a Catholic priest who comes up and says things is speaking for their constituency, which is not the entirety of the nation. We understand that. An imam from the north can also come up and say something else, or an animist from the western province or the northwest can come and say whatever. So we have to understand that these pronouncements, these things that come up because there is freedom. There is a basic freedom of expression. And in those days, if you said something like this in under Aijo's rule, you will be somewhere else. We know that. But it's okay. What we are trying to say is that probably, and it's not us. I'm sitting here to be honest with you. It is not us who is saying, you run. Is he willing to say, I am okay and I want to run? And if that's the case and they find him worthy, let it be so. Now, if there is any other look, Mr. Eric Chinje, to be honest with you, if there was a system where he can do an independent run, I think he will make a great show. This is the beauty of our democracy. As imperfect as it is, people should understand that the power is within their hold. If they want to do whatever they want to do and muster the political force and courage to do it, go ahead. Now, to be honest with you, the machinery may not be perfect, but we're working at it. That is why I've said all through this discussion that the manifest will of the people is what is actually responsible for who is heading the country. It is not because CPDM is so astute in trying to do political machinations or whatever. It is the manifest will. You have to remember, I've been in this party for a while and I've seen how people will vote for CPDM, really vote, regardless of all the movements that you see in the urban areas. Cameroon is still basically rural, and these people believe in the CPDM party. Now, if another party comes up with a program like Eric is insisting, a program that is substantive and that people want, I'm very sure that the CPDM people will be kicked out and we will happily go back home and then regroup and come back if we have to. I think that is the major narrative that I want you guys to hear, because it is not fair for you to say, oh, we're going to revolt, we're going to cause wars. What is that for? This is not the age of those kinds of things anymore. I think we're moving towards a system where we can develop political consensus, where we are very diverse. We are still a nation trying to identify our nationhood until such a time where a Bassa man and a Bamileke man and a Grafi man and the northerner can really find and feel themselves as a Cameroonian, we have our work cut out for us. We are still at a very embryonic stage. 6 years, believe me, is nothing. I'm hoping that the leadership that we get, whether it's Paul Biya or some other person, will begin to address these issues in such a way that we can all grow towards a better and stronger Cameroon. Our policy, our motto is unity, progress, and peace. You see that? Unity, progress, and peace. And this is what we are actually working at. And this is what is being championed by our leader. Despite the economic woes, despite the corruption, despite all of this, it is just fair to give Mr. Biya, the CPDM, the credit for having at least opened the windows, let more light in our political process. Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor Ejacha, Pastor Kennedy, could you
Oh, yes.
comment? Yes, can you comment on the role of the opposition? What is it that the opposition needs to do differently? I think that would be the last question on the role of the opposition. What is it that they have to do differently this time around? Because a lot of the things that we have preached so far have been preached in the past. Really, I don't see any difference with what they are saying now, because in 2018 they presented the situation as if Cameroon is going to implode. Here we are 2025, we are presenting the situation that Cameroon could implode if Biya runs again. The conditions are pointing towards that direction. What is it that the opposition can do? I think you can hear Hubert saying really looks a little bit reckless to point to a revolution or a revolt that could end up with the loss of lives. I think he's oblivious to what is already going on in the northwest and southwest regions. That we already have a war there that has taken thousands of lives and displaced a lot of people from that region. So what is it that the opposition is, as a package, presenting to the Cameroonian people, and how, or as Eric said, the agenda for moving Cameroon into the future, moving it from that entrenched system and state capture by certain individuals to a properly run governance system that is answerable to the aspirations of the people.
Okay. Yes, it's very important. There are three things that the opposition needs to do. And before I say the three things, let me make this clarification. When we talk about the situation in the Northwest, long before 2007, long before 2017, we had already warned the regime that its heavy-handedness in handling the Anglophone issues would result to what we are having today. And when we were saying it before it happened, it's not because we were naysayers. It's not because we were advocating for what is going on to happen, but it's because we had foresight. So you will not incriminate us for our foresightedness. We told people, if you don't listen to the Anglophones, there will be an implosion, and there is. The Anglophone had expressed this in 1993. They had expressed this pacifically in 1994 when we had AAC1, AAC2. An Anglophone candidate won the election in 1992, and it was stolen from him. Anglophones had long been considered as second-class citizens in Cameroon. All of these things help in shaping our foresightedness. And when I stand here, and I'll say, if the regime continues to have this heavy-handedness on the electoral system in Cameroon, it would leave Cameroonians and the opposition with no other choice but the choice to do these three things that I'm going to tell you right now. Number one, the opposition should be resolved that if the CPDM maintains its resolve to not open the political landscape, they should educate people on how to fight, and fight. Three things: fight, and fight for their right. Because what we are facing in Cameroon is unattainable, where people are just think that they own Cameroon. Look at the Constitutional Council in Cameroon. What is its role? What guarantee? What hope does it give to the Cameroonian people? Look at the Electoral Commission in Cameroon. What hope does it give to Cameroonians? How different is these structures today from what they were in 2018 and the years prior to 2018 where we had elections? Cameroonians have been so patient. Cameroonians have been so pacific. Patience has a limit. Being pacific has a limit. You can't continue to dare the people. You can't continue to ride on a tiger's back as these people are doing. Come on. When you guys say that there is freedom in Cameroon, go and say that to Martinez's family. Go and tell Martinez's family that there is freedom in Cameroon, that there is freedom of expression in Cameroon. Go and tell Awazi's family that there is freedom of expression in Cameroon. Go and tell BBC's family. Go and tell Terence Penn's family. Go and tell the family of all those Anglophones. Go and tell Bibu Nisak's family. Go and tell Alain Foguet's family that there is freedom of expression in Cameroon. My fellow panelists, it's not because some of us have gone through hell without being burned that we will not acknowledge that there is hell in Cameroon, no matter what you say. In 2019, I was in Cameroon, and you won't imagine. It's just like, I mean, when they told me that you'll be on a panel with me, so, I mean, a couple of days prior to me receiving this invitation, I just went and posted back one of the pictures that I had with you on my Facebook page, in which I acknowledged you, and then there I am on this panel with you. Now, you all remember, it was a picture that I took with you when we went in Cameroon for 2019. Because of us, what are we doing? We are putting our lives at stake. I left the United States of America in 2019, left family and children, left the coziness of my house, took a plane. That if you don't think that it's enough risk, flew to Cameroon because they sold us the hope of engaging and bringing solutions, long-lasting solutions to our problems. They used the country's treasury. We went, and in all fairness, we had a discussion in which we accepted some of the things that were offered on the table, not because we totally agreed with it. I'm talking about the special status. But for the hope of peace, we thought that genuinely this could lead us on the path, on the trajectory towards achieving what we want for our people. I'm saying this so that the opposition understands what is at stake. And the regime that we are dealing with just follow from the CPDM own people. If you've seen a video of one of the spokespersons of the longest House of Home, look at his lamentation just this week. What is the difference that there is in the status of the English regions with regard to the 8 other regions? Haven't we, Cameroonians, bled enough and accommodated this tyranny for a long time to say that the only logical conclusion that we can draw right now is that we need to fight, fight, and fight, and not be ashamed of saying that the way out may be to fight, fight, and fight. Now, how do we fight?
Thank you, Pastor. I think that fight would now lead me to transition to the last segment of this conversation, which is the church and the role of the Catholic Church in particular. I think recently we've had this flurry of outbursts from prelates across Cameroon, from Yagua down to Ngandere, Monsignor Cleda, and all the rest. Viciously calling for the president of Cameroon not to enter the re-election bid. But personally, I take a lot of exception with the outbursts of the church, because the church has been in bed with the regime in Yaoundé for the past 43 years. I think what they have tried to do now is kind of a window dressing. They preach virtue and practice vice. If you look at the message that came out from the annual seminar in Biya, if you look at the paper, the letterhead, and that goes to you pointing about the Anglophone problems, the letterhead of the message is in French. This is a document that was done in Biya, and this document was signed by Anglophone prelates. The signature page is in French. Even the Mr. President you have there, Le Président. And you begin to ask why Anglophones feel that they don't have a place in that country. If the bishops holding their annual seminar in an Anglophone regional capital could put out a document that insults even the call for bilingualism in that country, it can show you how deep the cancer has spread in the body politic of that country. So a lot of the people who are celebrating what the bishops came out and said about the regime, for me, I think what they were trying to do was give theoretical prestige to the fact that they have been, or hide the fact that they have been in bed with the government in Yaoundé. The bishop cannot hold an annual conference in Biya and do a passing statement. The last paragraph, almost the last paragraph, that's when they mention the Anglophone crisis. And they call it a crisis. At a certain point, they say war. At another point, they said violence. What exactly is the situation in the English-speaking provinces? Is it a war? Who declared the war? They said the person who declared the war based on that message are the individuals who don't want the war to end. And you have them referencing Mark 6, verse 25, verse 50, that do not be afraid. Take courage, do not be afraid. But it really smacks of exceptional deception for them to say that they were not afraid to call the person who declared war on the two English provinces. Are they telling us that Biya who declared this war is still the one that is pursuing this war? That they get to Biya, if they were really serious about healing that country, they could not call for the unconditional release of the Anglophone prisoners in the dungeons of La République du Cameroon to begin the healing process in that country. So to me, when I see them talk about the people are suffering from taxes, high taxes, difficult life conditions, I mean, the Catholic Church itself has the most expensive schools in Cameroon. If you are complaining that the people are already being stifled by the imposition of additional taxes, could you not in the same vein reduce some of the fees in some of these colleges? If you look at the visit of the Minister of Finance, I think was that yesterday or today in Biya, and you look at his courtesy visit to the Bishop of Biya, is a Michael Bibi. In his living room, the furniture that is in his living room, I think comes from Turkey, worth thousands of dollars. And these are the same people who are telling Cameroonians that there are people within the regime that are living in affluence. How do you rationalize that? If you remove the prelates or jumpsuit or whatever they are wearing and replace them with suits with the people in Yaoundé, you would see that is a mirror image of what is happening in that country. So I agree that there needs to be a revolution in that country. The system needs to be changed. So I'm going to go to you directly, Pastor Ijaga, for you as a man of God to really try to make sense to us. How did the religious institutions became hostages to the regime in Yaoundé? Because it seems like everybody is trying to curry favor with the regime for the perks that they are benefiting, the subsidies and all of that. So when they come in to talk, it looks like they are being stifled from actually addressing the root causes of this problem. They live in these communities. They are the people who give communion on every Sunday to these people that they are calling that they are plunging the resources of the country. How do you reconcile that? How do you give somebody communion on a Sunday and then on Monday you are telling people on Mondo TV that these are the people who are corrupt, who have plundered the resources of this country? So I think that the church has to really look itself in the mirror to sincerely, if they are going to be in a position to engage in the reconciliation of that country and resolve the problems in that country, I think the first thing that they could have done once they got to Biya was to call for the immediate release of the prisoners. They have not done that since the war started. And they have the audacity to tell people that the war is being contained and you forget about the people in jail. And they have that temerity to also tell people that, listen, the people should sit on the table and for dialogue. How many of these dialogues have gone out done by some of them? How many times have some of them come here in the diaspora and met with some of these activists? And nothing has been done. So to me, I think they should be sincere. Pastor Jaja, over to you. After that, I would ask Eric, Kenneth, and then Hubert to give their final thoughts.
Okay, thank you for, what you explained. You painted an eloquent picture of the duplicity that may very much be attributed to the church. But, I'm a man of hope. And what I would say here is that, let's say to the prelates, thank you for speaking out. Thank you for pointing out to the fact that this regime, in many ways, is responsible for the nefariousness that's in Cameroon. Thank you for pointing out some of these things that we have been crying against for a long time. Thank you, but we still need more. That's the approach that I want us to take. We should not just look at it and stick our heads in the sand and say, okay, you've not been there. Right now, we need everybody. We need anyone that makes a step in the right direction. Instead of pushing them back, let's pull them along. And what the church is doing today, as I said earlier, it's not exclusive to this time. We've had this previously. I named Monsignor Dokmo. I named Christian Karinatumi. I know we worked very hard towards one of the initiatives he had at heart, because he wanted us to have a sort of a spree. But you had the regime that stood against that. So the church should look itself in a mirror, and I think they have started that process of looking themselves in the mirror, and they are taking responsibility for certain things. Maybe we just need to speed it up. I'm part of the church. I'm a clergy. I've been a pastor for for about 14 years now, and I've been speaking consistently. And I'm not the only one who has been speaking consistently. So when we talk about the church, I cannot extricate myself from that church. My voice is the voice of the church as well, you know, because the church is, I'm part and parcel of that church. But it shows that the church is also, which is acknowledged, it's also a mirror reflection of the society. Because there are so many lay people who are against what's happening in Cameroon, just as there are so many clergies who are against and speaking. And there's some lay Cameroonians who think that it's normal what's happening. And the part of the clergy who also think that it's normal. But I think the abnormality that we are facing in Cameroon should not push us to the point where we will become utterly pessimistic. There's optimism, there's hope. The church is coming. Let's pull the church in. Let's show the light and let's point to the church. And I like what you're doing. Because what you're doing in some sense is telling the church that, okay, we are observing. You've said what you've said. But what about this document that you did in Biya? Wait, that does not point out to the essence of the problems that we have. Talking about who declared a war in Cameroon. We cannot second guess that Mr. Paul declared a war. He declared a war on his own people. So, how do we resolve that? I'm part of that clergy, and I've had a lot of fight back at times from Cameroonians when they say, oh, go to the church, go and be in the church. I say, no, I'm not that type of a pastor. I'm a pastor. I mean, I pastor people. But I'm not that type of a pastor who thinks that his communion with the people is only on Sunday. People come to church on Sunday, we communion with them, and we tell them goodbye and see you next week Sunday. You don't try to find out what happens to them on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then you say you are a shepherd. No, a shepherd, as Jesus Christ prescribed us to me, is someone who is with the sheep and smells the scent of the sheep. So, and I think that the church should get into this shepherdhood, the clergy especially. They should get into this shepherdhood where the shepherd, like King David, stood for the people. All what I want to tell the people is when the church and the clergy comes out, follow them. Maybe that's the beginning of the awakening that is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, I hope that they will listen to your plea, but we also have a duty and a responsibility to hold them to account. We are not just going to brush the role that they have played in the decay in that country. So I'm going to pass over to Eric to give his final thoughts as we draw to the end of the program.
Yeah, thanks again, and I must say it's such a great pleasure to listen to Reverend Ejacha. You know, the purpose of an event like this, of this program, is to help our country move forward. It's not to engineer a crisis. It's not to encourage conflict. That's not what this is about, and that's not what we are doing. But we are saying that one of the best ways to avoid conflict in that country today is to create that level playing field in the political space. And there's absolutely no way we are going to do that with Mr. Biya in the running. Why should a 92-year-old man take a whole country hostage? Why can the CPDM friends, brothers and sisters, not understand that? What is it about this that Hubert can't understand? That his great-grandfather, no, his grandfather, is capable of taking the mantle of a difficult country like Cameroon and take it out of the pits in which it is now? I heard a minister in Cameroon say he drives around and he doesn't see potholes, when Yaoundé is littered with potholes. We had a member of government drive from Yaoundé to Limbe and then talk about the state of infrastructure as if it was the first time he was seeing that. So Mr. Mbangangele obviously was totally impervious to everything that was being said about infrastructure in the country. And of course, you know, he attacks a minister who comes and attacks another minister. Look, there's something terribly wrong in our country. And we are hoping, Hubert, I hope you'll understand this, that let's give this country a fresh start. And the fresh start will require a strong leader with a clear program. And if you guys in the CPDM can provide that, we will vote for him. Open up the playing field. Allow Cameroonians to think about the future. This is a great country that once was seen as an island of prosperity. And I say this deliberately because I read that piece, that article in the Wall Street Journal in 1982, before my friends here were born. Well, a few years after they were born. But Cameroon was seen as an island of prosperity in Central Africa. Where did that go? No, please, Herbert and all the others who think we are out to get Mr. Biya. No, it's not about that. We're just out to help move our country forward. I am sure there are great leaders in the CPDM, as there are in a lot of other parties. Let's bring them out. Let's debate with them. Let's have them talk to each other about their programs. And we allow the Cameroonian people, finally, to elect a leader they believe in, and one who can take the country out of the current doldrums in which it is.
Thank you. Certainly, Hubert is a calm, fine gentleman that can also be a leader in Cameroon. I don't see why they cannot aspire to the leadership of that organization. But Hubert, your last thoughts, please.
No, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's been a very invigorating conversation here. It's always a pleasure to have senior brother Eric amongst us. I just want to say, you know, and it's again, you know, for lack of a better way of expressing it, we are, and Kennedy Ejacha will always say, I say these things, we are a very young democracy. And so we still, of course, have our work cut out for us. It's always a challenge. And politics is a game of chess. I'm not in the decision-making rooms in the CPDM to know why the name of Paul Biya is being thrown around. It might just be to test the waters, but nobody knows. What we are hoping, of course, is that in every Cameroonian's heart burns a flame of love for country. It is easy to criticize and play with the little political cleavages that are, of course, very normal. But our plea is for us to look at the big picture so that we can be guided by wisdom, truth, and foresight on the best way forward. And not just for those governing us, even for those who are being governed. I remember Eric, way back, he doesn't probably remember this, in one of his outings, where he had said that the task at hand is for every Cameroonian to sweep the dirt around his yard, for everyone to do his part, from the bench cleaners, from the market women, from the clergy, from the civil servants, from the actors of the private sector, if we can find in our conscience a superior love for nation, I think we'll all move forward. The tendency now is for everybody to keep blame on the government and those that are leaders of government, as if they are the messianic force that will bring paradise to that country. It is not. It's all of us together. People paying their taxes, people upholding their civic responsibilities at the very lowest level, so that together we can all act as a force for good. The problem we have and the challenge we have is that everyone thinks it is Paul Biya's task or the CPDM's task for that new Cameroon to be birthed. We govern what we see and what we hope to see. And in that process, we make mistakes. We make more mistakes, as a matter of fact, than right decisions. We are just hoping that there are institutions in place, deeply embedded in our national conscience, which will guide us to even rectify when mistakes have been made. That is why you see the CPDM is very big on creating strong institutions that some may think are just a semblance of what it should be, but it's just these baby steps. I'm sure when we are long dead and gone, people who our citizens of 50, 60 years may say, oh, they tried. This is what they gave us. This is what we built on. And in the long run, it will seem to have all been worth its while. Thank you.
Thank you, Hubert. Kenneth, I think I am now over to you. This is the first program in the spotlight. I think we had all these eminent personalities talk issues concerning Cameroon. What is your assessment? What is your last take on how the program has evolved? And your last comment as far as the role of the church and what we need to do to engage not only the people on the ground but the Cameroonian diaspora, because there's a lot of the Cameroon diaspora. I think they had BDC in Washington DC, and what is being done to mobilize them, because sometimes you hear a political leader is here, he meets with a handful of close collaborators, and then they disappear and go back to Cameroon. Sometimes you see these short snippets of videos on the meetings that they have held. How do you engage the Cameroonian diaspora here? A lot of them that sustains that country with their remittances. What is their role? So as a political consultant and somebody who knows this, the DMV area so well, what is in place? Are there any plans in place to engage these gentlemen? This is not the last conversation. We're definitely going to get them back here in the studio. But what is your take?
Okay, well, Brado, thank you. Please, if I may piggyback a little bit to the role of the church before I come back to the diaspora. Well, first of all, thank you for coming here and gracing our program. Thank you very much, and thank you to Pastor Kennedy and Hubert. Unfortunately, the opposition in Cameroon is sort of like a bird whose wings have been clipped throughout progressively so. And right now, that bird can no longer fly. Going back to what the church is doing, I would say better late than never. Because the church knows fully well, especially the Roman Catholic Church, that they know the role they play. And if we look at Africa, or Cameroon in particular, when the colonialists were there, they took only very intelligent children to become priests or pastors. That's why when you have a lot of these guys of a certain generation, like in Bishop Rogan and Sasse, and then you go to the French side, you have people like Paul Biya and the rest of them. You know, these guys went into seminaries And then if some of them eventually dropped out. So there were a lot of intelligent folk who were in church. Now, as time progressed, and these guys got into politics, they began to join occultic societies. And then in the case of Cameroon, you have the Freemasonry, and then you have Amok and what have you. And then the president in particular, he rather belongs to a dissident faction of, I think it's called GNLF, Grand Lodge Nationale de la France, and so on. Anyway, so the role of the Catholic Church coming in here at this point is very, very critical, given everything that has happened to Cameroon. And I think their role is to get down, pray, in order to decimate the demonic portals at various points throughout the national territory that have been installed and have been there for a very long time. In fact, in 1968, Amadou Ahidjo brought in a white horse and buried that white horse alive at the old presidency. And there were 8 or 9 of them. Paul Biya was one of those guys with Samuel Lebois who engaged in that act. So the role of the church is very, very important. And they've come in late, but it is very, very welcome. I'm going to say this as far as the leadership in Cameroon is concerned. We had a northerner rule Cameroon. We've had a southerner rule Cameroon. I mean, I hear... Look, in Nelson Mandela's book, even those who were older than Nelson Mandela, the Walter Cecilius and Victoria, what's the other name? These guys in the ANC learned from UPC of Cameroon. And today we still have some UPC people are still alive, and they're direct children. So why do we in Cameroon sit and think that ANC who learned from Cameroon, we're not going to have a repeat process of what happened in Cameroon? The youth are there. UPC youth are there. SDF youth, Grand youth are there. And you're telling me that these people are going to forget what their fathers and their forefathers did? In UPC, they talk of Pays Bamileke, Pays Bassa, and even in the far north. No. So that 30-year political, if Paul Biya doesn't step aside, we're going to have a repeat fracture of history that it's taking place all over the world, from Bourguiba in Tunisia to anywhere. It's going to happen in Cameroon. I don't know why Cameroonians think that, the Cameroon soil is this very special soil that nothing is going to happen. It will happen. And that's what we're trying to say. We're not here to attack anybody, but for that mutual respect of country, respect for our elders. We are saying that we don't want what happened in places like Liberia with Samuel Doe to happen in Cameroon. Please, let us, we're trying to appeal to the consciences of the powers that be to say, let us have a smooth transition of power, a graceful transition of power. And why not an Anglophone? Why not? An Anglophone cannot rule Cameroon. Really? The cornerstone that the builders rejected will be that stone that will build that country tomorrow. Wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you to the panelists. I graciously want to thank veteran journalist and our senior brother, Eric Chinji.
Thank you.
Pastor Ejacha Kennedy, Hubert, and Kenneth himself. And I want to thank the studio team for putting this program together. Thank you, our viewers. This is going to be a weekly program throughout 2025. We're going to be having people from different backgrounds to look at the topics of the day. We subsequently would maybe begin to focus on what has been done in each of the divisions in Cameroon. So for people to see at the grassroots level, if this development that the CPDM is preaching is actually there in their own neighborhood. The same, they could also expect to see the program that the opposition has for them if it is the continuous hot air that they blow. But I want to end with a plea to the Catholic Church, to the religious establishment. The only way we're going to begin to talk about reconciliation in Cameroon is to call for the immediate release of the Anglophone prisoners of conscience. A lot of them are languishing in the jails in Konegi. We cannot have the leader of the Southern Cameroon, Siseko Julius Ayoktabe, and members of his team locked up for almost 8 years, and the church remains muted on that. Just the same with the prisoners from MROC that were held during the last election cycle. So it is important as a collective that we begin to look at solutions to this problem. I also believe that the diaspora has a pivotal role to play in not only maybe engendering the so-called revolution, but also making the people on the ground see to it that there is change that is worth embracing. It's not just any type of change. Cameroon is, like Ken is saying, is not different from the other countries in the sub-region. Unfortunately, Central Africa is noted for leadership that is from Equatorial Guinea to the other neighboring countries, leaders that are like funds. Sometimes I say maybe the president was made fun of funds, and funds never leave the throne. So you can blame Paul Biya to a certain extent. They made him fun of funds, and funds. Hubert, you see that maybe that's why probably he's decided to stay on the throne until the good Lord calls him home. I think our people gave him the funds of funds, and that's why he's stuck in the throne. So thank you to our viewers. We are very humbled that you actually put all these almost three hours with us. It's a cold day in Washington, D.C., but see you again next weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, man.
Thanks.